Welcome back to the hustle and welcome back to the grind, everybody. Have you heard the latest news? The earlier you retire, the longer you're going to live. Yeah, that's a statement that a lot of people are making, and that's a premise that I was always going on. I always assumed. I heard other studies that had said that when you retire earlier, you reduce stress and therefore you're going to live longer. But it's not quite as simple as that. There's actually some differences there, and there's been a multitude of different studies, some of which are coming out of Europe, Netherlands to be precise, where they've tried some different attempts to try to prove this out over a series of years. And the idea of retiring early, as in, your 50s, between 50 and 60, seems to be that space. Now, currently, when you talk about the numbers, how many people are actually even able to retire in those timeframes? I mean, sadly, currently the way it stands right now, people between 50 and 60, we're only talking about maybe 17% of that group is able to retire. And of that 17%, only about 13% or so are actually between 55 and 60. So clearly very few people, and 54 represents a good chunk of that remaining number. So very few people are able to retire early to begin with. And when we talk about early, we kind of talk about numbers that are generally before 65. Because in most countries, 65 is sort of the standard retirement age. Australia just got bumped up. They're at 67. I know in Canada, there's rumors of possibly pushing it up to 67. And it's variable, but the general average is around 65. So people try to target that. The unfortunate reality is there's a growing epidemic of people that are not able to actually retire at even 65. It's sad. And now while the boomers are in a position, or many boomers are in a position where they acquired a certain wealth, they were able to buy a house, pay it off, in some cases a couple of houses, and pay them off, back when real estate was relatively cheap in most jurisdictions. But now things have changed a lot. So people are working longer. People are having to work well beyond their retirement years. And then what ultimately ends up causing them to move out of that retirement year is often getting pushed out either by one of two things. Either a bad health condition, possibly something, dealing with some chronic health issue, cancer, maybe some other problem, emphysema, you name it. I mean, the list goes on. There's a list of 283 and a half items that could potentially put you on the rocking chair of life, if you will. And so a lot of people end up retiring early or at 60, ultimately 65, 67, because of some chronic health issues, and they just sort of have to leave their job. And then the other half is they were getting pushed out. A lot of companies now say enough is enough, you're out of here, whether it's ageism, whether, I mean, Lord knows I lived that, but certainly I was nowhere near 65. But that's usually the other reason, is the company just says enough is enough. There's a lot of people that just are never able to really comfortably retire on their own and make that decision in advance, plan it out. There's a growing number of people that are pushed out, again, through their company's decision or just because of health issues. So, we're talking about a scenario of people that are able to retire early. And so we have to ask the question, for those that are older and considering either later retirement, what do you think? Is it in your best interest to keep working? Because some of these studies may indicate that working longer may actually extend your life, but other studies indicate that retiring sooner will extend your life. So there's a lot of controversy around this very topic, and it's a big driver as to why people make the decision to retire early or not to retire at all. A lot of people like the constant predictability of a paycheck. I mean, the reality is, the sad reality is chronic illness seems to set in somewhere in that 65.1, 65 to 66 years of age, when people tend to start developing much more serious chronic issues, health issues, that sort of force you to no longer work or start dealing with issues on a regular basis. And then life expectancy is about 76 in the United States. In Canada, they claim it's a little bit more. The numbers are what they are, but realistically, you're in your mid-70s on your average life expectancy in North America. And so that leaves us all wondering, you know what? should we keep working? The longer the better. Some people like the cash flow. Some people like that regular paycheck. Some people want to go on those regular vacations. Some people don't want to jeopardize giving up their big house or their lifestyle or their new car every 3 years. Some people don't want to give that up. Some people like the networking. Some people like the busy. Some people like that drive, the motivation to get up out of bed every morning and go to a job. I mean, those are all drivers why people justify working later in life. But again, I keep cycling around. Does that mean you will live longer? Well, I saw one study that had shown for pretty much every year beyond 52 that you work, you're going to shave a couple of years off the back end. So, I mean, that's all relative. This study in Netherlands, though, did something a little bit more formal. They incentivized people to work longer through taxation, trying to make reduce taxes and certainly make it more appeasing to push on and keep working longer and create the appetite to work longer. And they were able to study then the mortality of those people that were working longer. A lot of the people that were engaging in these processes and policies that allowed them to reap some of the benefits. So people tended to work a little longer. And as they worked a little longer, it revealed some interesting information. But also on top of that, we've also heard people that retire earlier often live longer. We've heard studies that are very contrary. We've heard studies that say, elevated levels of stress, chronic stress, are certainly some major contributing factors. That burden, that deliverables, having to deliver, the boss is asking for this, the boss is asking for that, this tension, the pressure, meetings, deadlines, that creates so much chronic stress. You don't even realize how much stress there is until you're out of it. But sadly, some people learn the hard way, and that chronic stress then can lead to problems, cardiovascular, heart, stroke, you name it, as well as mental health issues. It just creates a whole gamut of issues and concerns. And that can lead to, of course, early demise. So people, let's say if you're traditionally in a high stress environment, even doing shift work, just tough jobs that really take a toll on you physically, mentally, emotionally, are those jobs that are going to have a big role in how long you live. So while some people say reducing that stress, getting out of that work environment is the biggest reason you're going to extend your life, other people say, on the contrary, you know what, having that drive, having that regular paycheck allows me to eat better. I'm eating more food more regularly. I have the money. Some people claim that when you retire, you start skimping, you start eating less, and less isn't always better. I mean, you may start skipping on the types of food, the quality of food. You may actually not eat at all, and that then does take a toll on your health. So some people say retiring early does put some people at risk for not even taking care of yourself. So ultimately, the reduction in stress is a big factor in how long you can live. So again, some of these studies started to reveal that there are significant wins and gains by retiring early. Now, some of these studies revealed, this was pre-pandemic, so earlier than 2020, so back in around 2018, the studies that they showed revealed that an earlier retirement meant you were likely going to live a little bit longer. A lot of that, again, chronic stress. Typically, when you're retiring, a lot of people generally get out. They do more exercises. I mean, when you're working, you get up in the morning, you go to work, you sit at your desk. Some people have great physical work and jobs that keep them active and healthy, but a lot of people in the corporate world are just sitting at desks, grinding away. Add the stress to that, means little mobility. Of course, an added stress, you're not likely doing your health any good. But you know what? A lot of times people who retire start doing things like I'm doing, out walking, talking, being a lot more active. I've done more of, watching my diet a little bit better. I've certainly lost weight, but in a good way, because I've taken on more of a carnivore diet, putting on a little more, exercise, more miles every single day. And I can attest that I guarantee you, I feel 10 times healthier today than I was, say, a year and a half, 2 years ago. I actually saw, and I'll share this, At one point, and I'm not that big of a guy, small boned, to be honest with you, I peaked. I was almost 200 pounds at one point in my life. That's way too heavy. At one point, I remember my doctor saying, BMI chart, Mark, you should be around a $160, $165 max. Even that's a little heavy. You could even target 150, 155, is what my doctor said. Well, guess what? I've come a lot closer to my target since then, simply by doing some of what the doctor said. A lot of people leave the doctor's office and, he gives you, eat more vegetables, eat more balanced meals, get more exercise. Bing, bang, boom, right? Stop smoking, stop drinking. The classic message that the doctor sent you. Well, I kind of lived it. We go out to a party now. I don't mean to sound like a stick in the mud. I'm probably as much fun or more than I've ever been because I don't talk about work anymore. But realistically, you go to a social setting, people offer me a drink. I don't really drink beer anymore. I don't really drink too much alcohol anymore. It's rare. Back in the day, I kind of had more. I've given that up. I don't smoke. I don't gamble. I don't have a stressful job. I mean, technically, with all this walking, I should live to 142. I'm just kidding. But, they do say that a person can potentially live longer by cutting your career short. Again, in some cases, others would argue that's not the case. Because when you're not working, and some cases, depending on how then the decisions you make in your retirement can dictate that. I've also heard people that retire spend 8 hours in front of a TV per day. Well, if you're one of those retirees and you're living that type of lifestyle and eating Cheetos and popcorn all day long and munching away on pizza and beer, well, that's not going to do you any good either because now you have all that idle time, and a lot of people sort of fall into that area. Well, fortunately for me, I've made other decisions and I said, I'm going to go the other route. They said zig, I said zag. So that's the catch here. So regardless, we're seeing a couple of different trains of thoughts, and certainly there's studies that confirm both directions. There's some studies that advocate for people living longer by continuing working because of more cash flow. While you've still got your work stress, the idea of having less stress, worrying about where your next paycheck comes from, is another stress you no longer or you don't have. So you're trading one stress for another. And then some people, depending on the jobs, they are physical jobs. They're more mobile. Some jobs are more active. Some people get into better eating behaviors, eating, more balanced meals, more frequent meals. Again, it seems to be both of these messages coming from some of these surveys and tests are really kind of drill into the concept of the decisions you make while you're doing either. It's really more about, not so much about whether you decide to call or quits early is going to drastically improve your health, because you could go either way. You could live like a slob and then you don't have the longevity behind you while you're in retirement, or you could live like a triathlete while you're working and spend your other hours outside of, you may only have 3 or 4 hours per day, but you might spend an hour or two of vigorous exercise every second day while you're working in your career. And that too will have a positive benefit. So ultimately, some of these surveys, some of these results were relatively inconclusive. Some swing one way, some swing the other way. The bottom line is, the one summary really boils down on the decisions we make while we work, while we retire. A lot of it has to do with how we manage our lifestyle. Now, of course, if you're in a really, really hectic environment, I was in one of those environments, and I know firsthand that chronic stress wasn't doing me any good. And we spoke about that. So if you have one of those environments, you've got to recognize it, and you've got to find ways to manage in one way or in another. Do you need to maybe remove yourself from that stress? Maybe retirement's the answer for you, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's finding a different job within the organization, something with less stress. Maybe it's moving to another company. Maybe it's getting a simpler job that just doesn't pay as much, but you've pretty much tossed 80% of the stress out the window. Whatever it is, Lifestyle seems to be the biggest impact on longevity. So retiring early, well, 182%, I'm all for it, and I never regret a moment of it. I still stand by the fact that regardless if you live longer or shorter, you're still enjoying more of your own time. More time to do the things that you want to do, with the people you want to do them with, your family, your wife, your kids, husband, whatever. You're enjoying more of that time to do your own things. And that's why early retirement has other benefits that seem somewhat intangible, but they do shift your priority and your work-life balance to a place that makes life much more enjoyable. Anyway, I hope that really helps everybody. It's just a food for thought. If you've ever wondered, I've done some checks. The studies are kind of telling me overall, there's studies telling either or. You can always find verification, validation for whichever way you want to go. Either way, over and out. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. We'll check it out on the next one. See you real soon, everybody. Bye-bye.